Man, Boku Deku shippers just flatlined with this chapter of My Hero Academia. Who would have thought that Horikoshi would have finally put to rest the Boku Deku shippers and the toxic side of the My Hero Academia community like this? Pretty much saying that, yeah, Izuku and Ochako are going to be going out. I mean, this chapter pretty much confirms it. I mean, the final segment of the chapter is Hawks doing kind of like a voiceover, saying that, you know, his ideal world as heroes will have time to kill. You know, they'll be able to just, you know, live their lives without always having to worry about saving people. This very final segment of the chapter, it implies that, yeah, these two are definitely going out. Now, Horikoshi could, you know, pull the rug underneath us and say they're not next chapter, which, FYI, next chapter, chapter 430, is the last chapter of My Hero Academia. And let's take a few moments to really talk about that before I go any further, because I think that this is very important to really discuss before anything else. And that is the fact that My Hero Academia has managed to survive and be a manga within Weekly Shonen Jump for over a decade. And it's gonna be sad, man. Like, I know, like, we have definitely talked a lot about the toxic side of the community as of late when it comes to My Hero Academia, because of just, like, the whole romance pairings, shippings, etc. But it's going to be sad, man, to realize that when, after next week rolls around, after chapter 430 comes out, we will no longer have any new My Hero Academia content to look for. Now, here's the thing. There is always a chance that when Chapter 430 comes out in this next week, Horikoshi could do some form of sequel bait, maybe saying that, you know, the embers of, you know, One for All / All for One are not really gone, somehow they came back to him, or they transferred to someone, etc., etc. There is always a possibility, and even if that does not happen, technically, the world of My Hero Academia is very vast. There's a lot that goes on within the world. And so necessarily, if Horikoshi really wanted to, he could just shift the narrative away from, you know, Izuku, Ochako, and all of them to an entirely different group of characters, which I think would be fine. It'd be risky, obviously, since we have, you know, been with these characters for over a decade, but there is always a possibility for that. But, getting into the main point, I'm going on the assumption that My Hero Academia, it's done. It's over. And, you know, next week when the final chapter does roll around, I am definitely going to give my overall, like, uncensored thoughts on how I feel about My Hero Academia in its entirety, like, from start to finish. I'm definitely going to talk about just the good, the bad, the ugly, the great, etc., the masterpiece quality, the absolute horrendous. I'm gonna talk about it all. I'm gonna really just talk about the ups and downs of the story with the last chapter that's going to be coming out next week. But for now, let's focus on, obviously, the big discussion that everybody's definitely going to be talking about in this chapter. Besides, obviously, the romantic pairings, we have this new villain that appears at the end of this chapter, which gets settled in a way that showcases the progression of the world, and that, you know, what Deku fought for, what Shigaraki died for, you know, it did change the world in a better way. Even if it is very small, and only like a few millimeters to the right direction, it is changing, even if it is very gradual and slow. Because what this chapter represents, especially with this moment with this old lady, is showcasing that those that have made mistakes in the past and turned their back on Shigaraki, didn't help him when he was in a time of need, they're trying to correct their mistakes and do the right thing. That people are really trying to be better than what they once were, and trying to help out heroes and be heroes without needing a hero's license. You don't necessarily need to beat the crap out of a villain. You don't need to throw them in jail to say you're a hero. Heroes come in many shapes and forms. You have heroes that are firefighters, police officers, heroes that are old women that just grab the hand of a child that's scared and frightened. You have stuff like that. You know, heroes come in many different forms, and this chapter showcases that. It's a fundamental theme that My Hero Academia has been trying to tackle for a very long time. This is the core theme and message of My Hero. Heroes versus villains, two sides of the same coin. Sometimes they will not be able to coexist because they're just completely different in terms of ideals, clash of ideals, but also, if a world is to be better, then everybody needs to step up to the plate and do their equal part of helping each other, instead of just putting all the pressure on the greats, aka the best heroes, and nothing else. Because that's obviously why the world faced such a dark time, is because All Might was so great at his job. He was such a pinnacle hero that it basically caused problems problems within society, because once he no longer could be a hero, as we all know, we saw what happened to society. So, just seeing this type of stuff, and how, like, you have the granny trying to help out this dude that could have theoretically become the next Shigaraki, I really appreciate this, because it's very clear what Horikoshi was doing with this moment. He was basically saying that this kid right here, that obviously was shunned, you know, thrown away by his family and all that, and locked away and potentially was just left to die, was saved by someone and prevented from becoming the next Shigaraki that, you know, would have to be taken down. And obviously, since Izuku is not capable of using One for All to its max capabilities anymore, thanks to, you know, giving up the quirk and passing it on to Shigaraki before he died, you know, there isn't anyone that is to that level anymore to potentially fight until quirks evolve and another One for All / All for One kind of comes into the picture. But getting on to the point, the chapter tries to showcase that what happened with Shigaraki is trying to be prevented. Even if there will be things that will slip through the cracks, the world is getting better. And I think that fundamentally the message and theme here is that you should never give up and stop fighting for your goals. You should always fight for your ideal society, a society that is welcoming and tries to help those in need, and even those that might not be physically weak could sit and give a lending hand to those that are in desperate need. It's a really great message, and overall, I respect what Horikoshi did here. Like, you know, it kind of goes back to everything that represents My Hero Academia. Obviously, there's some things that this chapter doesn't represent, but for the most part, the core themes and everything that Izuku, at the very least, has been fighting for a very long time, he achieved it. And I think that fundamentally, great chapter. Honestly, it's really sad that most of the discussion, as I've already talked about in a few videos as of late, that most of the discussion on My Hero isn't necessarily on this development, but it's more or less focused on the pairings, because you know for a fact most of the people that are going to be talking about this chapter, and you know even I'm going to talk about it, is going to be talking about, you know, this Ochako stuff with Izuku. That's it. That's what people are going to be focusing on. They're not really going to be focusing on what this granny did to stop like a new Shigaraki or anything like that. They're not going to talk about Hawks' ideal life or society that he wants as well. Nobody's really going to be talking about that much, which is just, it's so sad, but I guess it's to be expected when obviously the story has had such a toxic fan base that's accumulated and grown over time, over a decade at this point, so it makes sense that that would be a big talking point. So I guess let's talk about the romantic pairings for a second, because obviously this is an important subject, even if I do think that it is not as important as the other themes. So one thing in particular that needs to be pointed out is this green tea. So I saw a post on Twitter, so I take no credit for this whatsoever, but someone pointed out that green tea, apparently, if you mix the names of like Midoriya and Ochako's name and all that, it actually forms into green tea. Now, I don't know if that's true. Anyone that can actually read Japanese and translate, etc., please do so. But according to what people were saying is this little, like, picture here, green tea, is kind of showcasing that Horikoshi is saying that, yeah, Ochako and, you know, Izuku get together. Once again, don't know if that's true, but regardless, even if this isn't true, this chapter pretty much does set up the fact that they are going to be together. I mean, we have this whole little moment here with the characters, like, remembering how they helped each other, like, you know, Izuku himself, even's like, you helped me all the time. You've helped me every step of the way throughout the story. This is basically reminding those that have forgotten of just the impact that Ochako has had on Deku's life. Literally since the very beginning, when he was about to fall down, she stopped him from falling. You know, everything about this, it's just like, she has been there for him. And so, if anyone says that, like, the potential connection between the characters has not been there, Horikoshi wanted to prove them wrong. So, yeah. Now, could the romance been done better? Yeah, definitely. But at the end of the day, as I've talked about already, the romance and shipping has never been the main focus of the story. It hasn't. The main focus is what I just talked about earlier on in this video. So this is more of a side plot, a subplot that is finally getting addressed and talked about. Now, I do feel like maybe it could have been handled a little bit better. Don't get me wrong on that. But for the most part, it's a very cute chapter, and I mean, anyone that expected Izuku to, you know, end up with anyone else, I don't think was really reading My Hero Academia. I'm gonna be honest. It's fine if you shipped him with someone else, but it was always gonna be Ochako. It always was. Like, there was really no one else that really fit the matching pair for Izuku whatsoever. So yeah, that is just something to talk about. But anyways, with that being said, I think, you know, overall, it's going to be interesting just seeing what this series evolves and devolves into as time goes on, because, as I've talked about and I mentioned before, you know, to this day, you still have discussions about Naruto's pairings, Bleach pairings, etc., and I'm willing to bet you My Hero is going to fall in that same category. As more years pass on by, the topic around this is probably going to get more and more toxic as it goes on, and I don't think it's necessarily ever going to be separated from the story whatsoever. But at the very least, regardless of people's headcanon, Horikoshi seems to be confirming who he wants to end up with who, and next chapter will probably officially address this with a time skip. So yeah, one more chapter. It's done. It's over. Man, it's gonna be a sad day. I'm gonna be sad when the final chapter comes out. Like, I'm really going to be sad. It's going to be sad knowing that I can't talk about My Hero Academia again. The good, the bad, the ugly, etc. But I'll leave it at that. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoy my content and you want more of my content to appear in your feed, do hit the subscribe button. Hit the bell icon as well to get notified for whenever I upload a video. And with that, Chibi out.